Okay, now, it kind of bothers me on a personal level that they had to put the female athlete in here as a different species to train. Okay, we know research that at one point in time, we thought that women weren't capable of tolerating and adapting to the stresses of resistance training. Praise the Lord, we now know that that's different. Muscle tissue is muscle tissue. Male muscle tissue is exactly the same as female muscle tissue. Male muscle tissue just happens to have a few more receptors for the different anabolic hormones that are testosterone, growth hormone, insulin-like growth factor, and insulin. But we know that the male glands, those factories, make more product. When you stop and think about cross-sectional area of muscle tissue. So for example, Michael, come here, please. And I'm making you come up here on film. Okay, so let's just say that you took McKay and Michael, and let's just say we were to completely section off our biceps and donate, relax, okay? And donate them to this experiment. Okay, so let's just say we pulled off every single one of McKay's, okay? And we laid it there on the table. Now, here's what we would have to do. We would have to section off every bit of Michael's as well. But here's what we would do. There might be more total muscle mass there, okay? But if we took the exact same cross-sectional area. So for example, go with me on this, laugh, okay? Let's just say that my bicep circumference was a whopping 10 inches. Okay? Yes, it was, Ms. McKay. And so then, let's just say if we took Michael's total circumference of his bicep and his was 12, if we got rid of 2 inches of his, and we made it 10 for 10, the cross-sectional area strength would be exactly the same. So per cross-sectional area, muscle mass in females and in males has the ability to express the same amount of strength. Say got it when you got it. Nice job. Excellent. Thank you, Michael. Okay. And again, you guys, that's in the right-hand column of page 145. When strength is expressed relative to muscle cross-sectional area, no significant difference exists between the sexes. Was that a good description? You completely understood exactly what I was talking about. Say, got it? Nice. Now, here's what we know. In terms of absolute strength, women are generally weaker than men because of the lower quantity of muscle. Now, here's what we know. We know that men typically carry more muscle mass. They have more androgen receptors. So because of those androgen receptors, they have the ability to express more muscle mass. Now here's a question. Is it possible for a female that's killing it, Fab 5, in the gym to have more muscle mass than a male that's not killing it in the gym? Yes or yes? Yes, Charles back there going, yes. Okay? We know that. So just because there's less potential for muscle mass growth doesn't mean that it necessarily is going to happen, because the male or the female body will respond to whatever you ask it to. Excellent. Now on page 146, we see this thing called the female athlete triad. Okay, now with the female athlete triad, we see these 3 things coming deeply into play. We see this thing, it's the relationship or the interrelationship between energy availability. Now, this book used to call this, the other edition used to call it something else. It used to call it body composition. I don't know if they felt like that was infringing on, but now they call it energy availability. What kind of people are you? If you have more adipose tissue, do you have more available energy opportunity? Yes or yes? Yes. Okay. Because fat typically is stored what? Energy. That's what that is. So it's the relationship between energy availability, the menstrual function, and bone mineral density. These three things come together to form the female athlete triad. Now, here's what we know. When energy availability, otherwise known as body composition or body fat, okay? When body fat goes dangerously low, females go through this thing called amenorrhea. This is the absence of your menstrual cycle. Now we know that when body fat gets dangerously low and you are amenorrheic for more than 3 months, it is your body's way of sending you a giant red flag warning. It is saying, hey, your body fat levels are so low that if you were exposed, your body probably would not get pregnant because you don't have enough energy availability or body composition or fat to be sure that you could grow this thing that you need to be growing. Yes?
Do you see a lot of this in like distance runners?
Distance runners for sure. Distance runners for sure. Females that get really, really, really lean, this starts to happen. Now, it's one of those things where there's a double-edged sword. Let's say I've got a collegiate distance runner, and she is just doing amazing. Do I really need her having a small amount of extra stored energy availability as possible? Why? Because what's she going to do? She's going to weigh less, which means over the course of that 5K, she's moving less mass, which makes her more efficient and effective at speed. But here's also what we know. When it gets too low, it starts to have an impact on your bone mineral density. So let's put 2 and 2 together, Roxana. Let's say that I have a female that gets dangerously low body fat, which means it gets to a point where there is such a little amount of energy availability, it's going to start pulling from muscle mass. And it's going to put you in danger of stress fractures. So this is why it's a double-edged sword. You want your cross-country, we really want all people to be as lean as they can, but just know with females that energy availability is a red flag warning that you're putting yourself at risk for osteoporosis. And even if you're in that amenorrheic phase when you're younger, it still can have a rebound effect to osteoporosis, because remember this, when are you building? We talked about this, remember. What is the age that you are building your hardest levels of bone mineral density? All of you are basically in it right now, between the age of 18 and 25. That's whenever. Hey, remember whenever we're talking about those osteoblasts blasting to the surface? That happens the most between the age of 18 to 25. So let's just say I've got a collegiate cross-country runner that's amenorrheic for her entire season. That person is now at a greater chance of having osteoporosis in later life because they were in that amenorrheic phase during their bone mineral building density years. Sort of a scary thing to start to happen. Okay? Now, another thing starts to happen with females. We are more in danger of injuries to our MCL. Does anyone know what that is? Medial collateral ligament. Okay, it's because of this thing called the Q angle. Does anyone know what in the world the Q angle is? It's the relationship between your hips and your knees. Now, here's what we talked about. What happens when females go through puberty? Hips get wider. Now, here's what we know. As those hips get wider, the knees sort of start to stay in the same place. Now, let's think about this. If you were to be able to look at me right now as an x-ray, and you saw the top of my femur here in my iliac crest, and you were to take it down, let's say we were to extrapolate that line out. Would that line eventually intersect? Yes, it would. Would it intersect at the medial portion or at the lateral portion?
Medial.
It would intersect at the medial portion, which means there is more force or torque on the inside of the knee. Now here's what we know. Is the knee, this is a review question, is the knee designed to receive frontal plane torque? No. What happens when the knee receives frontal plane torque? Tears your MCL. So now you're talking about a population that is already vulnerable to MCL damage. Then you take some sort of frontal plane torque and you really have it going on. So you have to be very aware of this.